So, good evening. Once again, we are back to the Spirit's book, and I'm going to share here. So, we are on chapter 5 of book 2, which is considerations on multiple lives. We started last week. We are not going to read from the beginning because we already read a couple of pages. We stopped here on the less than a minute, less than a second. So Kardec is explaining, and this is a text by Kardec, and he's explaining how the idea of multiple lives makes sense. He tries to reason the idea of multiple lives, and he said in the beginning he's not using any material coming from the spirits because he wants to eliminate the possibility of someone saying, oh, I don't believe something can come from the spirit, so I'm not considering. So he's trying with reason, with philosophical concepts, to reach to a conclusion comparing the idea of multiple lives against the idea of only one life and what makes sense and what doesn't. So that's his discussion here. Of course, you have to take into consideration to study this a couple of aspects, meaning first, you need to believe in God, because if you don't believe in God and you believe in material life, then a lot of the arguments he uses here makes it very difficult to understand and accept. And also, you need to be a person willing, with an open mind, to discuss different ideas and to analyze from different positions. Luis talked a little bit last week about the philosophical concepts, right? So we stopped here in this paragraph. We sometimes hear people say, Philip is on the plane, so he won't be able to read for us today. So Zoraida, can you read, or Paco? I don't know who.
Let me see if I could try. If it's not, what do you call it? You let me know if it's this interference, okay?
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Just like we sometimes, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. We sometimes hear people say, God, who is supremely good, cannot force a human being to restart a series of trials filled with anguish and tribulations. Is there more kindness in sentencing people to eternal suffering for a few moments of error than in giving them the means to make amends for their faults? Two manufacturers each had a worker who hoped to one day become their employer's partners. However, both workers wasted the day and deserved to be fired. One of the manufacturers dismissed the bad worker despite heartfelt pleas. This working person was unable to obtain any other employment and died of poverty. The other manufacturer said to the worker, you have wasted a day. You owe me compensation for the loss you have caused me. You have done your work poorly and you owe me for it. Start over again. If you do a good job, I will not fire you, and you may still seek the higher position that I had promised you. Do we really need to ask which manufacturer has proven to be the most humane? Would God, the paradigm of mercy itself, be more flexible than a just and compassionate person? The idea that our actions for a few years decide our fate for eternity, in spite of the fact that we could not reach perfection while we were on earth, fills the mind with anguish. Meanwhile, the opposite idea is incredibly consoling as it gives us hope. without choosing a side for or against multiple lives, and without admitting that either hypothesis is preferable, we contend that no one would prefer it if the matter were left to his or her own choice to sustain a sentence against which here is no appeal. A philosopher once said, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent one. That is what one could say about the concept of multiple lives. As we have already stated, God does not ask our permission when created divine plans, nor does God consult our preferences. Things either are or they are not. We will now investigate the probability and consider this topic from a different perspective, the philosophical point of view. We will not include any teachings imparted by the spirits.
Okay. So very quick, there is not much here.
Tell me in English.
Yeah. So basically what Kardec is saying here is using an example that everybody can understand, meaning two manufacturers employing two people that refuse to work one day, and one of them is fired, cannot find another job, dies of hunger and poverty. The other one is given another chance, saying, tomorrow you come back and you do the work that you were supposed to have done today, and you continue working for me. And if everything goes okay, you will receive what I promised. And, it's a basic question. Which one is more humane, right? The one that fired the employer or the employee, or the one that gave the employee another chance? And that's what Kardec is saying. If God is supremely just and supremely merciful, of course, God would give us not only another chance, but as many chances as we need to progress, understanding that there will be consequences for our lack of effort, our lack of work. And then Kardec asks, do you think it's fair that our actions on only one existence or in a few years decide our fate for eternity, in spite of the fact that we cannot reach perfection on earth? That it's difficult to understand, because the opposite idea gives us hope, saying if we have other chances and we can restart or continue to do the work, we will continue evolving. This phrase, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent one, was said by Voltaire. You'll find here in the bottom, François-Marie Arouet, Voltaire, the epistle to the author of the book, The Three Impostors, by the Voltaire Society of America. He was one of the precursors of the French Revolution, and one of the responsibles for all the knowledge that came with the French Revolution and the ideas. Okay. So again, Kardec's reinforcing here that he's not going to include any teachings from the spirits to be analyzing only from our material point of view here, from our own view here on earth. Okay, from the incarnates. Okay, any comments, questions here?
Question.
Yeah, sure.
Can I make the statement? God will give me infinite opportunities to better myself.
Yes.
That's a true statement. Okay, now the counter argument that people say regarding reincarnation is that what's the purpose? Because this is I heard many times. What's the purpose of reincarnation if you know that you're going to be given that opportunity? So you just let it go and you don't really work because you got tomorrow to work on it.
Yes.
Or day after tomorrow. This I heard many times for Joel.
Yes, and we heard also our friend Renato is not here, and he used to
Yeah.
ask this question all the time, right? He said,
Yes.
"Why would explain why should I make an effort if I, if I have will have another chance?" But the thing
Exactly.
is, if you don't succeed or you don't make any effort, things become more difficult. So the understanding of the challenges that we face in this incarnation, if we don't face them, we will have to face them again, and maybe probably in a more difficult situation, is the reason behind the idea of making an effort. Because what we said by the end of last week, right? When we said here, what is the duration of a corporeal life in comparison to eternity? What's a day's labor in comparison to the certainty of wealth and comfort for the rest of my life? So as we understand that the very little effort that we make in one existence will guarantee us a better future, that's the reason behind it, right? We work here in our physical life. We work to have a better life, a better future, right? To be paid and to have a more comfortable life. The idea of reincarnation is exactly the same. We make an effort here to have a better future, a better new incarnation. Okay? Make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So Eric asked here on the chat, the opportunities given must necessarily be here on Earth. Not necessarily. Actually, we can have incarnations elsewhere, but because our friends and enemies are around here on Earth, for us to incarnate outside of Earth would mean that the opportunities to readjust with those and to be assisted by our loved ones happens here on Earth. So that's why we spend many reincarnations here on Earth. But again, if we have the need to move away from everything for a one incarnation, because for any kind of necessity, it's possible that we may incarnate on another planet and then return here, because the connections will always exist and the readjustments will have to be made. So if you have to repair the damage that you have done to someone, you don't specifically need to repair to that specific person, because maybe the person will evolve and no longer need your forgiveness or your assistance, but you need to repair the mistake you made. You may need to repair to someone else. And Earth will give you the better opportunities because you've been here for a very long time. But it doesn't need necessarily to be here on Earth. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so let's continue. So here, we will not include any teachings imparted by the Spirit. That's important to remember. Kardec is making his own conclusions and assumptions, not using information from the Spirit.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. If reincarnation does not exist, it means we have only one corporeal life. If the present corporeal life is the only one we're going to have, then each person's soul is created at the same time as his or her bodies. However, if we assume the pre-existence of the soul, we know to determine the state of the soul before it is united with the body. If the soul existed, if the soul existed before the body, we must establish whether this state of being constitutes an existence. There's no middle ground. Either the soul existed before its union with the body, or it did not. If it existed, what was it? What was its condition? Did it possess self-awareness? If not, it must have been nearly comparable to non-existence. If it possessed individuality, it must have been either progressive or stationary. In either case, what was its degree of advancement upon uniting with the body? If, on the contrary, we assume that the soul is born into existence at the same time as the body, or that prior to the birth of the body, it possesses only negative faculties, we have to ask the following questions. Why do souls have such a diversity of aptitudes independent of the ideas acquired by the education? From where does the special aptitude for certain arts and sciences exhibited by many children at a very young age originate, while others remain inferior or mediocre for their entire lives? From where do some individuals derive the innate or intuitive ideas that others lack? From where do some children derive an instinctual gravitation towards vice or virtue, or innate senses of dignity or wrongdoing, which often contrast with the circumstances in which they were born? 5. Why is it that some people, independent of education, are more advanced than others? 6. Why is it that some human beings are savages and others civilized? If you took a, I don't know how to pronounce, koi baby from, koi, okay, got it right. If you took a koi baby from its mother's breast and raised it in our most renowned schools, could you successfully make this baby a Laplace of Newton? We would ask, what philosophy or theosophy can resolve these problems? Either the souls of human beings are equal at birth or not, that we cannot doubt. If they're equal, why are there so many different aptitudes? Do they depend on the physical attributes of each child? This would be the most unfair and immoral hypothesis, because in that case, it makes a person a mere machine. People would not be responsible for their actions, but would have the right to place all the blame for their wrongdoings on the imperfections of the physical structure. If, on the other hand, souls are created unequal, God must have created this way. In that case, what is this inherent superiority granted to some and denied to others? Would such partiality be consistent with God's justice and the equal love God gives to all creatures? On the contrary, if we admit the existence of multiple lives, everything is easily explained. At birth, human beings possess the level of insight that they acquire previously. They are more or less advanced depending on the number of lives they have previously had and how close or far they are from the common starting point. This is similar to how, in a company made of individuals of all different ages, each person has a degree of development and experience proportionate to the number of years lived. The succession of years for the life of the body is equivalent to what the succession of life is for the life of the soul.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Paco.
Okay.
Okay. So, what Kardec is saying here. If reincarnation does not exist, let's start with that, right? Let's suppose that reincarnation doesn't exist. And actually, I was, yesterday I was participating in a study that I presented reincarnation as seen by the diverse religions in the world that believe or non-believe in reincarnation. And besides the Eastern Hinduism and Buddhism that believe in reincarnation, and the Afro-American religions in Brazil that believe in reincarnation, all the other major religions do not believe in reincarnation. The Catholics, the Protestants, the Judaism, actually, the Jew. In Judaism, in the Kabbalah, there is a belief in reincarnation, but it's a small sect of the Jewish study. And in Islamism, they don't believe in reincarnation also. So reincarnation is, again, it's not widespread amongst the major religions in the world. But again, 35% of Americans believe in reincarnation. They don't understand how it works, but they do believe. So if they read what Kardec is saying here, they must agree that it makes sense, right? Because if reincarnation doesn't exist, then you have either the soul existed before it joined a physical body, or it was created with the physical body. If it existed before, we need to understand where was it? Because if there is no reincarnation, the soul was created how, when? What was the soul doing before reuniting with the physical body? Was waiting in a place? Was it progressing? Was it? So again, we don't have these answers because the question in itself, it's hard, right? Now, if the soul is created with the physical body, like many major religions believe, then you have all these questions that Kardec proposes here. Why souls have such a diversity of aptitudes, independent of the ideas, things that we studied last week, innate ideas, right? Where does it come from? The intuitive or innate ideas, some children that are more capable than others, some children that have a better behavior than others. So where all this come from? And then, again, apologies for the savages would be primitives. And Khoikhoi, it's primitive inhabitants of South Africa. So what Kardec is saying here is that if you take a baby from one of these more primitive people and raise them in a civilized society, how would they compare with a baby that was left there, right? And you see differences, but you see similarities. You see spirits that are born in these difficult places and ended up being successful. How do you explain that? How do you explain that individuals that are born in let's say in the slums in Brazil, you have a lot of them that become small criminals and then big criminals, and some that end up succeeding in life, going to even to college and things like that. Why this difference if they are raised in the same surroundings? And the explanation is that we had a life and we were progressing before this existence. So what Kardec is saying here is that when we are born, we already have some level of knowledge, some have level of moral evolvement, that we are more or less advanced, and we continue building on what we have. And then again, it's just proposing two sides of the discussion and allowing the reader to judge for him or herself what makes more sense. That was the idea of Kardec on this discussion here. Okay? Comments, questions? Okay, you continue here with a little more examples.
Okay. Imagine that 1,000 people of every age, from an infant to an 80-year-old, were brought together in one place at the same time. Suppose that the past is hidden from you, and you, in your ignorance, imagine then all to have been born on the same day. You would naturally wonder how some are big and some are small, some are old while others are young, some are educated and others ignorant. But if the past was revealed and you discover that some had lived longer than others, all these differences would be explained. God, out of divine justice, could not create souls either more or less perfect. Given our multiple corporeal lives, the differences in qualities that we see around us is still consistent with strict equality. Everything has roots not in the present, but in the past. Is this reasoning based on any preconceived system or hypotheses? No. Instead, it is founded upon the clear and undeniable fact that natural aptitudes, in addition to intellectual and moral development, are all different. This cannot be explained by any current theory. While the explanation is simple, natural, and rational by using a new theory. Does it make sense to prefer a theory that does not explain this fact over one that does? In regard to the sixth question, one will quickly dismiss the Khoi Hoi as an inferior race. To this, we simply ask whether a Khoi Hoi is or is not a human being. If it is a human being, why has God denied it the privileges granted to the Caucasian race? If it's not a human being, why to make it Christians? Spiritist philosophy is much more wide ranging than all of that because it acknowledges that there are not several species of human beings, but only humans as a whole, and only recognizes human beings whose spirituality is more or less backward, but who are all capable of the same progress. This view of the human race is more in line with the concept of God's justice, is it not?
Okay.
Wow.
Thank
Wow. You know that wow, that's advanced for that. You hear me? Isn't
Yes.
that advanced for
Yes.
1850?
Yeah, and you can see here what sometime one Kardec, especially when he is explaining here, it's very 1850, 1860, right? It's it dragged for a long time, but when he's talking about the trying to make it Christian, that's what the Christians have tried to make for centuries, right? Try to force them to become Christian civilizations that considered primitives to become Christians. But you know what? The idea that Spiritism brought at that time, the philosophy, is that we are all the same. We are all
Exactly.
humans. That's very advanced, especially because you still had slaves, and slaves were considered an inferior race, right? So what Spiritism brought is that there is no inferior race. There are just less or more evolved spirits, but all capable of the same progress. So, but the example that he gives here of the 80, at 1,000 people of every age, it's to bring it to give an example of an idea of something that we can using our imagination. Imagine you find a place where you have 1,000 people, from a baby to a 80-year-old, and you don't know anything about them, and you have no idea where do they come from. Their past is hidden from you, and it is told, you are told, or that they were all born on the same day, meaning the 80-year-old and the 2-year-old were born on the same day. So you start questioning, Why some are young, some are educated, some can read, some cannot, some are smarter. So, you know, to make a comparison and talking about God's justice, meaning that if God is supreme just and supreme merciful, it could not create souls, some more perfect than others. The justice lies in all of us being created the same. If we're all being, well, we are all created the same, why there are differences? Where does these differences come from? And that is where the idea of multiple lives and the concept of reincarnation comes into play and give us a reasonable explanation. An explanation that, again, makes sense. And he asked, do you prefer a theory that explains this fact over one that does not? Because what happens is when you discuss religion, reincarnation with the religious that are very strict religious, they would say it does not exist. And then you ask these simple questions. So explain me, how is God just if someone is born wealthy and healthy and others are born poor and with physical issues? How can it be? Where is God's justice? Mm-hmm. And of course they can't. They say it's God's will. But you know, God's will convince very few people of being the right answer. You have to have an answer. And that's, you know, what attracted me to Spiritism since the beginning was that Spiritism provides an answer to all the questions. And if we cannot provide an answer, if it does not provide an answer, it's because we haven't found the answer yet for our lack of knowledge or lack of understanding. But eventually we will. Nothing is dogma, nothing is hidden. And that's the idea behind what Kardec is trying to tell us, and the idea that of the concept of multiple lives that he brings here. Okay? Questions, comments?
I'd like to make a comment. You know,
sure.
We had the Civil War, what, in 1860s or 1863?
Yeah, 1862 to 1865, yeah. Right?
Something like that. But this book is from 1850, am I correct?
1857.
Okay, so anyway, it was before the Civil War.
Yep.
And it says here, there are not several species of human beings, but only humans as a whole.
Yes.
That's quite I don't know.
Yeah. Advanced for the time. That's quite advanced for the time.
I believe so.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mentioned this before when we were studying reincarnation, right? But reincarnation, the concept of reincarnation was not disseminated amongst the spiritualists here in this country, exactly because of slavery, because Kardec thought and was advised also by the spirits that if they try to spread the concept of reincarnation here,
yes.
you will find a lot of resistance, because slave owners would never admit having to reincarnate as a slave, would never accept an idea like that. So that's why reincarnation, if you go to the spiritualist movement here in this country, you don't find reincarnation in it.
Wow. I mean, that's your thinking. Did you read that or what?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. It's not that you don't find. You find. There are those that believe in reincarnation, and Carol can help us more because she knows more on the spiritualist movement here. There are those that believe, but it's not widespread. Correct, Carol?
Wow. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, it depends, probably which city, but generally in their credo, they do talk about reincarnation. They believe in it, but they do sort of emphasize more about healing and mediumship. So perhaps they lessen the tone on specifics of reincarnation, but most spiritualists that I know do believe in it.
Believe in it. Okay.
Yeah, but I would say I couldn't give you a percentage on the American spiritualists. I wouldn't know, but
Yeah.
the ones that I know do believe in reincarnation.
Yeah, when we went to Lilydale like 10, 12 years ago, which is
Oh,
the
right.
spiritualist city there in close next to Buffalo, we couldn't find anything anything on reincarnation there. It was we didn't ask. We're not asking people if they believe, but the focus was mediumship, nothing healing and mediumship, not reincarnation.
Yes, that could be, I think, a correct statement. Yes.
Yeah, but again, the concept it's there, and of course, if 35% of Americans believe in reincarnation, you can imagine that amongst the spiritualists, the number has to be higher, right? Because they are more open to these ideas than let's say the Protestants or the Catholics, right? Okay.
Yes,
All
yes.
right. Thanks, Carol.
Go on.
Go on. So let's talk about the future now.
Okay. We have considered the soul in regard to its past and its present. If we now consider it in terms of the future, we encounter further difficulties that modern theories still cannot explain. One, if our future destiny is to be decided solely by our present life, what will be the respective positions of the savage and the civilized person in the future? Will they be on the same level, or will there be a difference in the level of eternal happiness? Will the individuals who have tirelessly worked their entire life to achieve moral and intellectual improvement be placed at the same rank as others who have remained at lower points of moral and intellectual improvement, not through their own fault, but because they have neither the time nor the opportunities to advance? Can individuals who have done wrong because they have not been able to enlighten themselves be held responsible for a state of affairs which did not depend upon them? We strive to enlighten, moralize, and civilize all humans. But for each individual that we're able to successfully educate, there are millions who died every year without ever seeing the light. What is their fate? Should they be treated as sinners? If not, how have they deserved the same treatment as the others? 5. What is the fate of children who die before they have been able to do either good or bad? If they are welcome among the purest spirits, why they have been given this standing without having done anything to deserve it? Why are they exempted from suffering the tribulations of the physical life? What Cartman doctrine can solve these problems? If we acknowledge our consecutive life, all these problems are solved in compliance with divine justice. What we are unable to complete or do in one life, we accomplish in another. Thus, no one escapes the law of progress. Everyone is rewarded according to his or her own merit, and no one is excluded from the ultimate attainment of supreme happiness, regardless of the obstacles they must overcome on their journey to get there.
Okay, thanks, Paco. Here, when Kardec then addresses the future, right? So he asks, if our future destiny is decided solely by our present life, where is divine justice? Because we all have completely different lives. We have individuals that have all the opportunities, may not take advantage of them, but have all the opportunities. We have individuals that have no opportunities, that struggle to survive. Where is God's justice if we both individuals will have to be judged by a supreme being, which is what the major religions believe, that you are judged, externally judged, according to what you have done in your present life, and then you go to heaven, hell, purgatory, or other different. Basically, the religions talk about the same, right? The Muslims say that Allah will judge you and decide if you are going to heaven or hell. The Catholics and the Protestants talk about heaven, hell, and purgatory. The Jewish, they don't really talk about the future life. They are still waiting for the Messiah to arrive, and then they will know, and they continue waiting. So, you only find notions of future life in the Eastern religions, in Hinduism and Buddhism, and in the Brazilian Afro religions, the Umbanda and the Candomblé. So when we talk about the future, again, multiple lives, continuous progress, it's what makes sense, what's reasonable, because then all individuals, all spirits will have endless opportunities. What you cannot achieve in one incarnation, you have an opportunity to achieve in other. What you haven't succeeded in learning or overcoming in one incarnation, you have your whole eternity ahead of you. So that would explain a child that dies, at a 2-year-old child that dies. Where is the justice if this child had not lived before and had no opportunity of doing anything positive or negative? Where does this child go? And when you understand that the concept of eternal spirits, a child of a 2-year-old is an eternal spirit that for one reason or another had to endure a very short incarnation and had to return to the spiritual world after just a short experience here. There are many reasons this may happen, but there is always a reason. So that's the what Kardec is asking. Besides what we are talking about, spiritism here, that if we acknowledge consecutive lives, these problems have an answer and are in compliance with divine justice, what other doctrine can answer these questions? So that's the future, okay? Any questions, comments here? Okay, let's move on, Paco.
Okay. Questions related to this subject may be infinitely multiplied because the psychological and moral problems that can only be solved by the theory of multiple lives are innumerable. In this work, we have restricted our examination to the most general issues. Some detractors may maintain that whatever the arguments in its favor, reincarnation is not acknowledged by the Church, and its acceptance would therefore not only conflict religious doctrine but utterly decimate it as well. Our objective is not to discuss the implications of this subject, but rather to highlight the exceedingly moral and rational character of the theory. On the contrary, we may confidently contend that a moral and rational doctrine cannot possibly be antagonistic to a religion that proclaims the divine being to be the paradigm of goodness and reason. What would have happened to the Church if, in opposition to scientific research and discoveries of humanity, it had continued to resolutely reject overwhelming evidence, thus ostracizing anyone who did not believe in the movement of the sun around the earth or the 6 days of creation. How would enlightened nations, quotations, have retained any shred of credibility if they continued to champion a religious system that taught such obvious errors as steadfast beliefs? Whenever any evidence has been established conclusively, the Church has sensibly supported this evidence. If the facts of human life are proven to be irreconcilable without reincarnation, if certain points of church dogma can only be explained by such means, the church will be forced to acknowledge its truth. It will have to confess that the apparent antagonism between these two arguments is superficial. Religion has no more to fear from the acceptance of this doctrine than from the discovery of Earth's movement and geologic time periods, which outwardly appear to contradict the sacred text. In reality, reincarnation is implied in many passages of the scriptures and is explicitly noted in the Gospels. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, "Tell no one about the vision until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." Then his disciples asked him, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" He said in reply, "Elijah will indeed come and restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also will the Son of Man suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood while he was speaking that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. Matthew 17, 19, 13. Since John the Baptist was Elijah, this implies that Elijah's spirit or soul must have reincarnated in the body of John the Baptist. Whatever our opinion about reincarnation is, regardless of whether we accept it or reject it, we will, if it exists, have no choice but to experience it. The crucial point here is that the Spirit's teachings are predominantly Christian. They are founded on the concept of the immortality of the soul, future rewards and atonements, God's justice, free will, and Christ's moral code. For that reason, it cannot be considered anti-religious.
Okay, thanks, Paco. So here, Kardec continues discussing the concept of the theory of multiple lives, and he brings the church into it, the religion. Remember, mid 1900s, Spiritism was born in the clear dominance of the Catholic religion in France that was still very powerful, still dictated a lot of the customs, and actually Kardec was sent to study in Yverdon in Switzerland because of the impositions of the church in the education of children in France, and his mother believed that he would have a better education in Switzerland, where the Catholic Church had no influence on the education of children. So that's why he went there when he was in the beginning of his teens and studied there throughout his teenage years until an older age. And then he went back, returned to Lyon and moved to Paris. So the church was very powerful, and the church was actually persecuted Spiritism. You have the burning of the books in Barcelona. That was a major event that happened in the middle of the 1860s. That a large shipment of Spiritist books were sent to Barcelona, and the bishop burned the books. And Kardec was said that In fact, they burning the books, they call more the attention to Spiritism than if they had just accepted the books. And he said that was because books can be burned, but ideas cannot, right? So that's why he goes here in this discussion of why the church will be against the idea of reincarnation. Because if the church had accepted that Earth goes around the sun, that Copernico and Galileo were burned for it. Actually, but Copernico was burned, Galileo retracted, if I'm not mistaken, or the other way around. But the church eventually accepted it, right? So what Kardec is predicting here, and so far it has not happened, is that eventually the religion and the church will have to accept the theory of multiple lives, not Spiritism, but the theory of multiple lives, because it makes sense. Because, as he said, is already in the scriptures. When Jesus says, Elijah will come, and Elijah had already come, meaning Elijah was John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the reincarnation of Elijah. So, of course, if you find that in Matthew 17:9-13, it means, how do you read that if not with the concept of reincarnation? So he finishes again this last paragraph. He's saying here, Spiritism is not trying to negate the church. Spiritism follows the teachings of Jesus, so Spiritism is Christian predominantly, but it's, the concepts of immortality of the soul, future rewards and atonements, and God's justice, free will, that everything is in accordance to Christ's moral code, so it cannot be considered anti-religious. Okay? Comments, questions here?
Yeah, I'd like to make the comment. Okay, I have to say also before I open my mouth that you all know that I'm kind of biased against the church. Okay, so bear that in mind. Okay, whatever I say, bear that is coming from someone who's kind of, not too kosher with the church. But Galileo had to, when he went to the Pope, he recanted because he was going to be killed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, then he was ostracized and given all the titles and all that. And, my point is that, church is, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. He was ostracized. And I understand that it wasn't even until recently in the 70s that it reversed itself. But that I cannot vouch. So it says here that the church is going to be forced to acknowledge the truth. I don't know about that. I have my bias, Joao. Okay.
Yes, I still believe that eventually the church will accept it, because if you think about the church, the concept of heaven and hell, that the Pope John Paul II said that heaven and hell are states of mind. This is a huge progress of the church already, because before that it was the heaven and hell were physical places, right? So I think that, but again, the church cannot make big changes. It's like a very large ship in the sea. If it has to turn to change directions, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to change directions. So the church is like that. And we cannot expect sudden changes, but they happen. They slowly happen.
You're more positive than I am, anyway. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's finish this. We have a couple of pages more, and we're done with it.
You want me to go on?
Yes, please.
We have discussed this Where are you?
Yes, exactly that.
Okay. We have discussed this subject without referring to any of the Spirit's statements because they do not constitute an official authority for many people. If we, and so many others, have adopted the belief in multiple lives, it is not simply because the Spirits have preached it. The reason is that it is rational and resolves inconsistencies that would otherwise be impossible to explain. If a person suggested it to us, we would adopt it assuredly and quickly. We would renounce our preconceived notions because when there is proof that an opinion is flawed, even self love has more to lose than to gain if it clings to it stubbornly. Likewise, we would reject the theory of reincarnation if it appeared to conflict with reason, even if preached by the spirits, just as we have rejected many other ideas they suggested. We have learned by experience that we cannot blindly accept ideas suggested by spirits or people alike. The biggest advantage in support of reincarnation is that it's incredibly rational. It also has the confirmation of facts, both positive and material, that are clear to all who study the subject patiently and purposefully. This eradicates any possibility of doubt as to the reality of reincarnation. When this affirmation becomes widespread, those who currently oppose it will be forced to relinquish their opposition. This is precisely what happened with ideas concerning the formation and rotation of the Earth. In summary, the theory of multiple lives is the only one that explains what is otherwise inexplicable. It is, it is comforting and it complies with the concept of fair justice perfectly. It is, it is the life preserver that God throws to humanity. The words of Jesus leave no doubt regarding this last statement. As we read in the third chapter of the Gospel according to John, verse 3, Jesus' reply to Nicodemus, very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. Verse 4, Nicodemus said to him, how can someone be born when they're old? Surely they cannot enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. Verse 5, Jesus answered, very truly I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, but the Spirit gives birth to spirit. You should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again.
Okay. So, in conclusion, Kardec is telling us here that he didn't use any information from the spirits. What he used here was common sense, reason. So he said that if someone comes to him with this idea and explains to him, and an open-minded person has to understand and accept that the theory of reincarnation makes much more sense than other theories. You may like it, you may not like it, you may accept it or not, depending on your views and your biases. But that it makes sense according to how Spiritism explains, it does. And also Kardec makes a strong point in saying here, we do not blindly accept ideas suggested by spirits. We have rejected information given by the spirits because Kardec knew that spirits are just us on the other side. So us on the other side will tell us according to our knowledge, and we may think that we know things that we don't. So that's why he collected information from several different mediums and several different spirits, compiled them, analyzed them, and eliminated what was not, what didn't make sense or were in contradiction with other information. When the book Posthumous Work, which was published after a long time after Kardec's death, which was a book compiled with information found amongst his belongings, talks about these experiences that he had. Unfortunately, the book is not translated into English, not published here for, I don't know exactly why, but it talks a lot about the work of Kardec. Again, it's not a book published by Kardec. It was published after his death by the Spiritist Society of Paris. So again, he finishes talking about words of Jesus and a conversation with Nicodemus when he says, when Jesus says that flesh gives birth to flesh, but the spirit gives birth to the spirit, meaning we reincarnate not with the same physical body, but in a new physical body. And Jesus is very strong, saying, you must be born again. And actually the so-called the born again Christians use this phrase for the baptism that they perform and the ceremonies they perform. They read this as the necessity of being baptized when you are born again, meaning you become Christian. That's where they take this from. Okay, that was it. Any final questions or comments here? Thank you, Paco.
My pleasure. I heard some disruption at the end. Did you?
Somewhat.
Some disruption at the end? No?
No, it was just someone joined the call and the microphone was open. So that was it. Okay. And I closed the microphone and it disappeared. Okay. So what do we have? We have this weekend, this Saturday, we have a lecture by Marcio Silva, Our Important Choices to Suffer Well or Badly, a reflection on how Spiritism guides us on aspects or causes of suffering within the process of spiritual evolution, including how we can proceed to better understand and face our suffering. So suffering is according to Spiritism and how we choose to suffer, okay? On Sunday, we are going to study the book On the Way to the Light. We are almost finishing it. We should finish this month or next. And again, I would like to invite you all to Luis' lecture on the United States Spiritist Federation. That's going to be 2 weeks from this Saturday on October the 2nd. And he's going to talk about, remind me of the title again, Luis.
Spiritist Philosophy and Science.
Spiritist Philosophy and Science. Okay. It's very
the correct English is philosophy or philosophy?
Philosophy.
Philosophy
right?
of silence?
No, philosophy. It's philosophy, not philosophy, right, Paco? Philosophy. Yes, Carol is nodding her head. It's philosophy, yes.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay. Carol, you do our final prayer?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, John and everyone. Infinite Creator and Supreme Intelligence, we are grateful to be together this evening to share our studies of the Spirit book. We are grateful to have an in-depth and a better understanding of Kardec's perspective through multiple lives, book 2, chapter 5. And we have learned that we do have multiple lives through the reincarnation process. In each life, we have the opportunities to make an effort and to continue to progress or to take off where we have come from a prior life. We are here to improve and to better ourselves, not only ourselves, but our loved ones, our community, and fellow seekers. This is rational. However, most religions do not subscribe or technically believe in or accept reincarnation. People, however, find where they are, what they believe in, and often pursue it again on their own. So they don't necessarily subscribe to a religious point of view, but reincarnation for many is an acceptable and believable tenet. We know that spirit gives birth to spirit, and we do subscribe as spiritists to the process of reincarnation. We give thanks to our spiritual guides, our spiritual benefactors, our mentors, those protector spirits who are guiding us, and we receive their blessings, their wisdom, their guidance each day. We are grateful for this, and we pass along this to our family members if possible, to those that we are surrounded by, and to better the world that we live in, the physical world. We are grateful to the love, light, and peace of Christ, and may this be received within us, in our hearts and in our minds. We humbly ask for the safety and protection as we go forth now to family, friends, and loved ones. May we continue with our studies, with our prayers, and our mindfulness throughout the week, making all around us uplifted, and in a way, opening our hearts and minds to something greater. We close now and remind ourselves to be beacons of light. Go forth now in peace, so be it.